Today we are going to be looking at motorized sliders and why they are very handy tools to have for shooting video. And then we'll get into comparing up these two particular slider models that I have here. So whenever I'm shooting these sorts of videos, and particularly product reviews anyway, one particular trick that I found that does help make a video more engaging is using B-roll footage of the product overlaid whilst you're talking. It just breaks the video up, it gives the viewer something else to look at. It's also quite handy for masking jump cuts as well, but shh. So I try and incorporate overlay footage where possible to try and help break things up, but obviously the overlay footage has to be engaging as well. You can't just have a static camera and a static product because nothing really moves, it's just like having a still image. So sometimes what I do is I put the product on a turntable, a Lazy Susan, so the product's spinning around. So that gives you one element where you're seeing the product from multiple angles. But another thing you could do is move the camera rather than the product, so it's giving a different perspective and it's giving the viewer a sense that they are moving. Now you can shoot this handheld, but obviously then things can get a bit wobbly. So a slider lets you put the camera on a preset path, a rail in essence, and it can move in a far steadier way. And there's a few tricks I found as well that can give you even more creative shots. The first is to use the camera on a motorized slider along with a turntable, so you have the product spinning and the camera moving at the same time. The other thing you can do is not have a camera on your motorized slider, but actually put a light on instead. And again, just adds an extra dimension to the shots that you're doing. But anyway, let's take a closer look at the two motorized sliders that I have for review today, because they're actually quite different to each other in many aspects and they have their own pros and cons. So this one is the Micro 2 motorized slider by Zeapon, and this, I kid you not, is the chocolate and milk from YC Onion. So straight away, this wins points for the most unusually named product I think I've ever seen. But straight away, side by side, there's two obvious differences when you get them in your hands. This one is much smaller and it's much lighter. It's only 30 centimeters long and weighs less than 800 grams, so is very travel friendly. You can put this in a bag quite easily and take it with you pretty much wherever you go. This one, by comparison, is over 40 centimeters long and weighs almost 2.5 kilos. So yes, you can take it round with you, but it's going to be a lot more noticeable. Both of the sliders can be powered either by a battery or by USB cables, but again, they're completely different in how they've done this. So the Milk Chocolate uses the Sony FW50 batteries, which you find in the first and second generation A7s and the A6000 series cameras, whereas the Micro 2 uses the Sony NP-F batteries. Now, in terms of battery life performance, your mileage is obviously going to vary depending on aspects like what speed you're making the slider move at and how much weight you're putting on there as well. Now, at no point was I able to flatten the batteries in these. Admittedly, I haven't tried to, but in all the times that I've been using these sliders for my various pieces of video work, even when using them for a couple of hours, the battery still had a fair amount left in them, which leads me to believe you would get around 3 or 4 hours at least on battery alone from both of these sliders. It's worth noting that because the Milk Chocolate doesn't have a power button, it will remain active whilst the battery is plugged in. So once you've finished using it, I suggest you unplug the battery, otherwise it'll be flat the next time you come to use it. The Micro 2 you can power using a pretty common USB Type-C port, whereas with the Milk Chocolate you get a supplied USB cable, but unfortunately it's not a standard cable. It's one that's got a step-up converter and not a USB plug either, which I personally will mark as a negative because it means that you have to have this specific cable with your slider, and if you lose the cable you're stuck to being only on batteries. I much prefer having a more common plug like a USB Type-C because then it means you can use pretty much any cable to power it. In terms of payloads, both of these are able to take pretty hefty weights. The Milk Chocolate can manage 3 kilo payloads if you're using it mounted on a tripod, but actually up to 10 kilos if you have it freestanding on a table. The Micro 2, however, is rated up to 4.5 kilo payload safely, and I believe up to about 8 maximum, but 4.5 is more than sufficient. Hell, for what I've been doing, 3 is more than sufficient. Now, you might be wondering, why does the milk chocolate have 2 weight ratings depending on whether it's on a tripod or on a table? This is where we come to another drawback of this slider, in my opinion. Both sliders employ a similar tactic in their design, which is that they have a separate top plate and base plate that move opposite directions of each other to extend the travel distance of the rail. With sliders without this, the top plate will only travel the distance of the rails. So if the rail is 30 centimeters long, you only get 30 centimeters worth of travel. With both of these sliders, however, they employ more of a pulley system, so you actually get double the travel distance to whatever your rail is. However, here we come to the drawback of the milk chocolate, because you only get double the rail distance when this base plate is secured in place. So this will allow your camera to shift 28 centimeters end to end if it's on a tripod. However, if it's not on a tripod, it's going to be freestanding on these small feet. But then that means you're not getting that double rail distance that you normally would, so your travel distance is restricted to only 14 centimeters. On the topic of end-to-end, again, this is another aspect of the milk chocolate that I was disappointed with, which is that there's little tape markers that tell you when the slider gets to this point, please stop it. But there's no automatic stopper there, so if you go beyond that, it just hits the end of the rail but continues to try and go, and you just get this very loud clunking noise and a jolting motion, which I'm sure over long-term use could end up damaging the belt or something. But that's only if you're manually driving the slider. Most of the time, what you would do with these is preset a start point and an end point and a speed and let it take care of the rest. Now, there's no buttons or anything on the slider itself to control it. Everything is done through an app on your phone connected via Bluetooth. The app itself is very straightforward to use, but I found it to be a little bit simplistic. You can only set the slider to automatically run at a linear speed. So you set a start point and an end point for the slider, and then you can pick one speed for it to run with, but it will stay at that speed for the entire duration of the slide. If you want a slider motion with a variable speed, this is not something that you can pre-program through the app. This is something that you would have to do manually by changing the slider speed settings. Now, by comparison, the Micro 2 pretty much solves most of the problems that I've mentioned about the milk chocolate. Now, again, because this employs a pulley system, you get a naturally longer travel for your camera than the rail is. So the rail is only about 35 centimeters long, but you actually get around 52 centimeters of travel end to end. But the difference is you can mount this on a tripod, or you get this little kickstand included. So it screws into the bottom, and then it's got these 4 little legs that swing out. So it means that the whole slider is still pivoting around this center point. So it doesn't matter then whether you mount it on a tripod or it's freestanding on a table, you will always get that 52 centimeters travel distance. My criticism of this, however, is that it becomes very easy to shake the foot plate loose, and then before you know it, it's rocking all over the place. So you end up then having to retighten it all back down. Again, a few more aspects of the Zeapon that I really like are things that I don't like about the milk chocolate. The first is that there are controls on the motor itself, so you can control the slider, at least at a basic level, without the need of having to connect up an app and everything. And I like this because there's been times where there's just been like one little shot that I've wanted to get of something, and I've been able to just set this slider up and quickly take the shot. I can just change the speed and get that's at its slowest setting now. So a relatively slow travel. But with the milk chocolate, if I've wanted to do that, I've had to set everything up, connect the app, set the start and end point, and then adjust the speed. So having at least some basic functionality on the slider itself, I think, is really helpful. In terms of the app for this as well, it's a little bit more complex. It lets you do speed ramps, so you can set 5 positions, if you like, 5 checkpoints essentially, and then you can alter the speeds from those particular points. So it just gives you a lot more scope and flexibility in terms of what shots you're trying to come up with. The only downside to the Zeapon app I found, however, is that trying to set really slow speeds is extremely difficult. So with the milk chocolate, you can just move the slider all the way down to 1%, and at 1% that gives you close to 30 minutes worth of travel time. With the Zeapon app, however, it's all done by moving points on a graph, and I've found it's not particularly accurate when trying to get right down to the bottom. It's supposed to give you a preview to say how long the travel time is going to be. Unfortunately, when you get right down to the very bottom of the graph, it just says it's 0 travel time, which makes it kind of difficult if you've got a specific shot in mind because you don't know how long it's all going to take. And like the milk chocolate, the Zeapon also has time-lapse functionality, so you've got the same little time-lapse port and you can set everything up in the app as well. Now, unlike the milk chocolate, the Zeapon actually has an automatic stopper. There's a little magnet on the end of the rail here, and when it reaches a particular point inside the motor unit, it cuts the motor off itself, so this bit never crashes into the motor unit. But in terms of fastest speeds, however, the Zeapon actually outperforms the milk chocolate. Despite its longer rail distance, it's able to run end-to-end in around 16 seconds, whereas the milk chocolate takes slightly longer at around 18 seconds. Now, in terms of prices for both of these, the milk chocolate is retailing, I believe, at around $400, whereas the Micro 2 in this configuration with the footplate and everything, I believe is retailing slightly more at about $480, but I will leave links to both of these in the description down below. But that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Which slider would you pick and why? Would you pick the Micro 2 for the longer travel distances, or would you pick the milk chocolate just for the name? Leave your thoughts and comments in the box down below. While you're down there, if you haven't already, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.